I'm Vamsi Vasireddy. I'm a senior advisor at OGAC, which is where PEPFAR sits. It's interesting to see how many people outside the PEPFAR world do not know the complex organization of PEPFAR. Well, PEPFAR is the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, as most of you know, and it is housed in the Department of State, which is where I sit. And we work through our implementing agencies, which are like HRSA, NIH here, CDC, USAID, who in turn receive funds from PEPFAR to do the great work that we do. Our office is officially called the Office of Global AIDS Coordinator. That's where OGAC, the acronym, comes from. PEPFAR is really good at creating acronyms, if you haven't noticed. For people who work in the PEPFAR world, they know. Like, we have an acronym for pretty much everything. We will even create an acronym for your name, if you give your letters. So today I'm going to talk about the historical investments of PEPFAR, and it's a good segue to what you heard yesterday from Ambassador Gooseby, who was the ambassador for PEPFAR under the Obama administration, and now it's Ambassador Burks, who's the ambassador for PEPFAR. So how the historical investments and what we have accomplished so far, and the direction the U.S. government is going in terms of supporting medical and nursing education in sub-Saharan Africa and in other PEPFAR countries outside Africa. A little bit of background, as I mentioned, we are, if you've been following the news, you will see that lately we've been talking a lot about epidemic control, which is what we use the standard definition of epidemic control, where the new HIV infections are less than the number of deaths in PLHIV. So right now, it's really a fantastical moment, which we are. We are at this stage in the epidemic response where we are able to actually get a control on the epidemic without a vaccine or a cure. If you think about it, it's pretty phenomenal that we still don't have a cure or a vaccine for HIV, and yet we are at a stage where we can control the epidemic with our sustained efforts. The latest data that we released over the last, since mid-2017, it shows that in 6 countries, Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Eswatini, we've adopted the new name, Zambia and Zimbabwe. In these 6 countries, the epidemic is getting close to being controlled, and about 13 additional countries could reach epidemic control by 2020. We see a good data coming out of the horizon. The PEPFAR, Ambassador Burks released, and actually the Secretary of State, the past Secretary of State released the PEPFAR strategy for accelerating epidemic control last year, which shows which reaffirms U.S. government support for HIV/AIDS efforts in U.S. government's leadership and the efforts that we are doing to control the epidemic in over 50 countries. For people who read the statement, you may be a little confused as to, there was a focus on 13 countries in that statement that the Secretary of State released, but it doesn't mean that we are only working in 13 countries. We are working in all 50 countries with an additional focus on the 13 countries, which we hope will reach epidemic control by 2020. So traditionally, PEPFAR has invested heavily in the health workforce, and I'm using the term health workforce here and not just education, because we focus not just on educating and training folks, but also employing and supporting them through the cycle of employment. There is pre-service training investments that we've made heavily, which you have heard yesterday and throughout the sessions yesterday about MEPI and NEPI, which are a great example of pre-service training investments. We focus heavily on in-service training. In fact, if you look at PEPFAR's model of service delivery in any country, a lot of the clinical service delivery partners that implement clinical service delivery, it's mandatory that they also do in-service training to the health workers at clinics. And mentorship, we provide mentorship as part of our support. And the most important one that going forward that we are looking at is the salary support. And I'll show you data about like this, on all these different elements of support that we've done. You've heard so much about MEPI and NEPI, and it's been a great success. And I mentioned it during the PI Council meeting on Sunday. The US government support is one thing. We are thrilled to support and see the results, but it is the leadership of the PI Council and leaders like you who are sitting in this room that made it happen. It's because of your work that MEPI and NEPI has been a success. So you should all give yourself a round of applause for that. It's a little bit of data. MEPI had established assisted in the establishment of 10 new medical schools, and in many medical schools, the intake was doubled because of the MEPI support. And at the same time, NEPI, which is the Nursing Education Initiative, that supported about 19 nursing schools in different countries. And they still continue to influence nursing and medical education in sub-Saharan Africa through the AFREhealth, which you are here sitting and attending. So as I said, PEPFAR is big on data. We love data at PEPFAR. In fact, the language we speak is not English, not French, not Portuguese. We speak data. So this is what I would say. In God we trust. Everybody else bring your data, or else we don't trust you. So make sure that you have your data if you want to make an impact. A little snapshot of the traditional, of all the investments that US government has made and what it has resulted. You'll see that it's the course of the years since 2012 when we started collecting data on the number of graduates that have come out of PEPFAR support. The total number of graduates so far since 2017 until 2017 is over 200,000 health students have graduated with PEPFAR support. And what I mean support is, it's not necessarily scholarships or tuition. It also includes mentorship, curriculum development in schools, faculty development, and as a result of that, how many students have graduated. So we count all that. And you'll see that it peaked in 2014, the number of graduates that came out. Over 50,000 health students graduated with PEPFAR support. And that's a pivotal, that's an important time, because that's when you started seeing the results of MEPI and NEPI. By that time, you started seeing the 2-year nursing graduates come out, some of the allied health cadres come out of PEPFAR support. And in the last years, you'll also notice that in the data, since 2014, the numbers have steadily declined. And this is not because that we are investing less in health workers. Our investments have strategically shifted from pre-service training to actually supporting the health workers that have graduated, employing the workers. That's where most of our investments are going these days. And a little more breakdown of the graduates that in 5 years, from 2012 to 2017, you'll see that there's over 14,000 doctors that have graduated with PEPFAR support. Bulk of the graduates are nurses. You'll see that over 78,000 nurses have graduated in the last 5 years with PEPFAR support. Followed closely by other cadres, which include allied health cadres, including pharmacists and other data clerks, such cadres. Excuse me. And I wanted to also show you where our investments are geographically aligned. You'll see that the total by region, the light blue is East Africa, which occupies the bulk of the bar chart here. So majority of the graduates are coming out of East Africa, followed by Southern Africa, which is the dark purple. I think it may be showing in different shades of blue up there, but here it's showing in purple and blue technology. And where you see that the investments are strategic because the great need for health workers is in sub-Saharan Africa. So most of the graduates that are coming out of PEPFAR support happen to be in the sub-Saharan African region, with very little in the bottom, which is the green that you see is a very small sliver of the graduates. That's Asia and Europe, which is very strategic in countries like Vietnam and Cambodia and Thailand. And I want to show you a little more. When I told you the language we speak is data, I wasn't kidding. Be ready for this. We also want to show you, like, even among when we talk about most of the graduates coming out of East Africa, this is the breakdown of the graduates by year. And all this data is available for public consumption. So if you want to see the PEPFAR investments by country, by each country, how many students have graduated in Kenya versus South Africa versus Malawi, you can always go to our website and the data is available for public consumption. So you'll see, like, over the years, a lot of the graduates have come out of East Africa. Again, bulk of the graduates are nurses and other cadres. Same thing in Southern Africa. You'll notice that in the Southern African region, I listed the countries which we count under Southern Africa, mainly nurses and other cadres, which are other cadres being mostly data clerks and pharmacists and allied health cadres. West Africa is interesting. We have traditionally we don't have many West African countries under PEPFAR's scope. We have Cote d'Ivoire, we have Nigeria, which some may debate that is it West or is it Central. Then there's Cameroon, and we count DRC under West African countries. And Ghana is a very specific focus because it is not our long-term strategy country, which we call it's a short-term strategy country. So our investments are very specific in terms of what we do. So again, the focus is again on nurses because we believe that nurses are, if you heard the plenary yesterday afternoon, you'll see how important the nursing workforce is towards not just HIV/AIDS, but also in terms of primary health care everywhere. The nurses provide bulk of the services in many of these countries. So we've invested heavily in graduating nurses in these countries, and it's showing. I want to end closely by, where we are going. So so far I've shown you what the investments we've made and the impact that it has shown. And going forward, it's important to know that future sustainability, money is scarce in these days, especially. We all know how administrations change and priorities change, and funding levels are never guaranteed. And so at PEPFAR, we strive hard to be efficient in what we do, which means strategically focusing our investments based on what the country priorities are. And I will stress this, our success depends on partnerships. As I said before, our support is one thing, but in order for our support to be successful, it's your leadership and your effort that is critical in making this support a success. So partnerships with the host country governments, indigenous organizations, which my colleague Suzzane will talk about in a minute. We are focusing more on indigenous organizations going forward. If anybody has seen the press release from the US government during IIS a couple of weeks ago, we are going to be focusing, our goal is to reach 70-30 split by 2020. What does that mean? We want 70% of our funding to go to indigenous organizations and 30% going towards international, like US-based organizations. That's our goal by year 2020. So we are focusing more on and that is critical. The partnerships with host country governments are critical in order to make that partnership a success, and shared responsibility. Like, it can't be one or the other party leading the way. It has to be a shared responsibility between us. And focus on capacity building for health training institutions, which you have seen through MEPI and NEPI, and which we are continuing going forward in a different scope and a name probably, which we are trying to figure that out. And I wanted to mention when I said salary support, last year alone, PEPFAR paid salaries for over 150,000 health workers in sub-Saharan Africa. That's a huge investment. When you see the pre-service numbers, training numbers go down, this is where the money is going. It's going to now we have graduated a bulk of the workforce. Now we need to employ them. And that's where we are putting our money, is in making sure that these graduates are employed and delivering services according to the agreed upon scope of work. And we're also focusing on optimizing our health worker distribution to make sure that we have right people in the right place, which I'll show in a minute. But we are not getting away from the business of health education. That is still a core focus. But we are going to be doing that in a more country-specific strategic manner and not in a generic all countries manner. We're going to be very specific about which country needs the most versus which country needs another level of support. As I said, while the total number of graduates has decreased, the actual support towards health workers has significantly increased over the years. For example, we've doubled the salary support that we are providing for health workers in countries like Tanzania and South Africa since 2014. Investments in mentoring and in-service training have significantly increased to make sure that there is quality of service delivery. And we've ramped up our trainings on KPOPs and GBV. And this is my last slide. As I said, we're making sure that we have right people in the right place using data. Again, data tells us a story, and data will tell us where you need to go. So that's where we are going, and I will take any questions after my colleagues will speak. I want to end on this note from, it's a daunting task addressing HIV. It's not easy, but we are all in this together, and it may seem impossible at times with scarce funding or uncertainty in leadership, but it always seems impossible until it's done, and we'll all get this done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Before I start, I wanted to make sure to recognize Dr. Peter Donkor for his leadership these past years in helping guide the PI Council as it's transformed itself into the AFREhealth organization. He and other members of the executive committee have done just a fantastic job. I also would like to make sure to thank Dr. Suleiman and her team for their efforts in organizing this terrific symposium. All of the hard work that they've put into this is really obvious. Everything has been beautifully organized. I'm happy to be here today speaking on behalf of HRSA. HRSA sits under the Department of Health and Human Services, and I like to describe that for folks who don't know as sort of our equivalent in the United States of the Ministry of Health. Where I sit within HRSA, we provide the majority of the HIV services that are provided in the United States. But within that, despite all of our domestic work, we have a small group that does global activities, and all of our global activities are funded by PEPFAR. And so that is what we have been focusing on over the past 20 years with PEPFAR. The focus of my talk today will be on capacity building and how HRSA has had their partnership with AFREhealth. So I know we've had a lot of PowerPoints, and I'm just going to speak and not have too many PowerPoints here, but I do want to put one slide up for you all to outline the context within which we're all working at PEPFAR. Let's see if I can. Sorry, I'm very bad at that. Okay, thank you. So as Vamsi alluded to, recently the Office of the Global AIDS Coordinator, OGAC, has announced that there'll be a shift in the way that funding is provided for the PEPFAR program. There'll be a dramatic increase in the direct funding going to local indigenous organizations. And this is a huge change because currently only about 20% of the funding goes to these organizations. As a first step, over the next 18 months, U.S. agencies receiving funds from PEPFAR will need to direct 40% of their funding to indigenous organizations. Essentially, we'll have to double what we've been doing now in the next year and a half. In the next step, by the end of the next 30 months, a full 70% of PEPFAR funding must be given to indigenous organizations. Moving forward with this directive means that agencies like HRSA and others need to identify local organizations who can not only provide HIV services, but who also have the capacity to manage PEPFAR funding per our U.S. government regulations, which, as you can imagine, are relatively strict. Where these organizations have weaknesses, we will need to work with them in order to build their capacity to manage these USG funds and, of course, to achieve the PEPFAR goals and objectives. For HRSA, this is a natural outgrowth of the work that we do domestically. In the United States, all of our funding actually goes to local organizations to implement HIV programs. In the global arena, our largest program, which has just ended, the Medical Education Partnership Initiative, MEPI, as you all know, also provided PEPFAR funding directly to local partners. So for HRSA, this new directive is actually, we have a strong track record in this area. So within this new focus on sustainability, it's an important context for us to keep in mind as we look at the future and the growth and the development of AFREhealth, which certainly qualifies as an indigenous organization. To this end, over the last 18 months, HRSA has provided 2 types of support to AFREhealth. First, as AFREhealth was getting up and started, the General Nursing Capacity Building Program, GNCBP, which includes NEPI that you all know of, and is implemented by ICAP, worked to help strengthen the role of nurses within the PI Council as membership began to expand beyond physicians. ICAP supported a nurse representative to participate on the new PI Council, or the expanded PI Council. They funded 28 nurses to attend the last symposium in Kenya. They also organized a satellite meeting at that AFREhealth symposium to sensitize nurses about AFREhealth and to get their inputs into the development of the organization. A second nursing satellite meeting was organized as part of the last CUGH conference. AFREhealth, again, was one of the points of discussion during that symposium, that satellite meeting. Also, during the CUGH conference, ICAP provided funding so that a nurse representative could participate on their panel. So again, it was more interprofessional. And last but not least, ICAP supported the PI Council meeting that was held in Malawi, including travel, tickets, accommodations, in the meeting room. As GNCBP came to an end, HRSA has transferred our support through our new Human Resources for Health Cooperative Agreement. It's called Health Workforce for the 21st Century. We affectionately call it HW21, and it's being implemented by CHPIGO. The overall focus of the HW21 and the AFREhealth partnership has been to help the recently formed and newly registered NGO to become a self-sustaining and independent organization. As a first step, the AFREhealth Executive Committee requested support to finalize a number of draft foundational documents and strategic documents that they'd already created. Specifically, they wanted assistance with their strategy and the development of a business plan. To address this, Health Workforce 21 provided a consultant with expertise in this area who's working hand in hand with AFREhealth to complete these documents. Next, after a number of joint planning meetings, it was agreed that Health Workforce 21 would work with AFREhealth on implementation of 3 key areas of their strategic plan: governance, operations, and marketing. Because of the very fluid situation regarding the NIH grant, which AFREhealth had applied for, Health Workforce 21 agreed in the short term that really they should focus on governance. So to help keep the momentum of the executive committee going, HW21 worked with AFREhealth to support meetings in Accra, Kampala, as well as the recent PI meeting that was held just last Sunday. With regard to operations, Health Workforce 21 partnered with AFREhealth to outline a core operational structure, which will include an executive director. In addition, together they developed job descriptions and standard operating procedures. In terms of marketing, AFREhealth and Health Workforce 21 are working together to identify priority activities, such as gathering data about the needs of AFREhealth's current and potential clients, defining AFREhealth's added value and their specific niche, as well as identifying the benefits that AFREhealth will be able to provide all of the members. So we strongly encourage all of you to actually sign up for registration. You've got the sheets in your folders there and to turn them in. Future activities that HRSA will support via Health Workforce 21 will actually focus on more operations and marketing and will be determined jointly with the new executive committee. There's a lot to build on. I can see it from this meeting here that will help move forward the work between the two. In addition, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that several of the other HRSA partners have also supported colleagues to attend this symposium. We have folks here from Liberia, we have folks from DRC, and all of this has helped again to broaden the partnerships and the constituency of the organization. In closing, it's been a real pleasure for HRSA to work with AFREhealth leadership and support the evolution of this important organization, and we look forward to continuing our partnership over the next years. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Wait. Thank you, Peter. So if Vamsi said his slides would reflect what's important to PEPFAR, which was data. Apparently, what's important to NIH will be cartoons. So make sure you have your cartoons. Okay, I'd like to talk briefly about our collaboration and partnership with and our synergies with PEPFAR and with HRSA, and how we've used it to address the AIDS epidemic. Just for those of you that are not sure where Fogarty International Center fits into things, we're one of 27 institutes and centers at NIH, each of which have their own mission. And our mission is science for global health, particularly to build capacity for global health research through strengthening academic institutions in low and middle income countries. So here's my first cartoon. This is the classic three-legged stool of academia, and I think it's generally acknowledged that to be a strong institution, you have to be strong in each of the legs of this stool: teaching, research, and service. NIH's mission is specifically and exclusively on research. So in order to address all legs of that stool and to build capacity in institutions in an integrated way, we need to partner, and that's where our partnership with PEPFAR and with HRSA has come in. Now, I know we assume all of you know about MEPI and NEPI, but I want to put this into some perspective for you. MEPI, of course, was a programmatic attempt to build the workforce to address the global AIDS crisis and also the rest of the health needs of Africa. There was a parallel, that was for medical schools, and there was a parallel effort with nursing education through NEPI. 13 institutions received awards in 12 countries, and I just wanted to point out that PEPFAR provided $100 million for this effort, but in parallel, NIH provided an additional $30 million in linked awards to these institutions specifically for research and research training. The institutions that received the awards had partner institutions in Africa and partner institutions in the US, as well as ministries of health. So these are some examples, but they formed a very extensive Pan-African network, and that was sort of an emergent property from these awards that became, in fact, the basis for what became AFREhealth. Now, that was the first generation of awards, which technically ended in 2015. In 2015, NIH decided to do a follow-on to their linked awards, and they offered grants in the area of training junior faculty in these institutions, with the thought that one of the weak links in all of this is that you need a next generation of robust research and health leaders. And by improving the ability of the junior faculty to become independent researchers, we could start planning for that future. So this was called the MEPI Junior Faculty I think it was called Career Development Awards. There's many of the fellows in the audience. We now have 300 fellows concurrently being trained across all these awards. And we were at a network meeting on Saturday. Very interesting progress is emerging from this, particularly a lot of multidisciplinarity that we didn't anticipate. Now, the next generation of the PEPFAR-funded programmatic awards are now under competition. One of them is called HEPI, so MEPI, NEPI, HEPI. HEPI is the Health Professional Education Partnership Initiative, and it's meant to be interprofessional. So we want to continue the capacity building that we started, not necessarily in the same institutions. And this was available to medical or nursing schools, but required some interprofessional activities and sorry, excuse me. No, I'm fine. And also to integrate research into the medical or nursing curricula. Those are currently under review, and awards will be announced in the next few weeks. I want to give you another example of what we've done with PEPFAR, and this is another very important area that was raised in some of the talks yesterday, and that's that people with HIV are living longer, and as a result, they are accumulating additional comorbidities, particularly in the non-communicable diseases. 4 years ago, PEPFAR gave funds to NIH to convene a group of stakeholders to explore the idea of building on the HIV chronic care platform to address NCDs in people living with HIV in sub-Saharan Africa. And they were to come up with a research agenda in that regard. So they worked for 4 years. There was over 100 stakeholders. And they worked in all the areas shown in all the lenses shown in this honeycomb. The product of that has now been published. So this was just a supplement to the journal AIDS came out in July that addresses all of these areas and what their findings are. I think you might find it interesting. Dr. Goosby and Wafa El-Sadr did an introduction to that. We've also more recently started an NCD data modeling project to look at the burden of NCDs in people living with HIV in sub-Saharan Africa. And that's an ongoing project, a collaboration between African researchers and US researchers, and that is through our Center for Global Health Studies at Fogarty. So that's our collaborative work. In respect to our synergistic work with PEPFAR, we have, of course, been training people, particularly to do research in HIV/AIDS for 30 years now. Since 1988, Fogarty's provided $1.5 billion in extramural grant support, a lot of this to train people for HIV/AIDS. We've trained over 5,000 health scientists from LMICs, many of them from Africa. The trainees, particularly in AIDS, have remained in their home countries. 85 to 90% have remained in their home countries after training, and we're giving increasing numbers of awards to directly to the foreign institutions, like the MEPI and MEPI Junior Faculty Awards. We've had a lot of successes, which obviously I'm not going to go through here, but I did want to note that in respect to creating the next generation of leadership, many of these trainees have gone on to have very important positions, including ministers of health, deans of medical schools, directors of national AIDS programs, and so forth. And if you look at the major breakthrough papers in this field, almost all of them have former trainees as authors. Now, I want to give you just two final thoughts and their metaphors. Fogarty will continue to help all of you build institutional capacity for research. And we offer a pretty diverse portfolio of grants, and they're very confusing to look at. So I wanted to just give you the strategy and the sort of systems thinking behind the way we organize our portfolio. My first metaphor is the house, which I borrowed from Jerry Kirsch 20 years ago. If you train somebody to be a researcher and your institution cannot provide support for their research, you're likely to lose your investment. The person will leave or the person will fail to thrive. So we consider there's a series of core capabilities that every institution has to develop in order to support that workforce. Some of the examples are given here: informatics, mentoring and leadership, bioethics, the formation of IRBs, libraries, animal welfare, grants offices, et cetera. During the MEPI period, we encourage the development of these core capabilities, but we also offer standalone programs that can help your institutions build them. Then, of course, on top of that is people, and probably our director would say that our mission is to invest in people. That's really what we do, and we do that through training and fellowships. On top of that, we have research and educational development grant opportunities, and at the very top, in a small percentage of our portfolio, is what I call venture capital, high-risk, high-reward, experimental type of programs. The second metaphor is the pipeline. And again, if you train a young investigator and you don't offer any further reasonable, feasible opportunities for them to advance their career, again, you're probably wasting your investment. That person will fail to thrive. So as we reorganize and we keep tweaking our portfolio, we're thinking very much about this pipeline. So at the beginning of the pipeline are our training programs, our D43 programs. We offer a series of fellowship programs through our Fogarty Global Health Fellows and Scholars program, and through 2 individual career development awards. For LMIC scientists, it's the K43, which I think is beginning to become very familiar to you. 5 years of mentored research and protected time. And then there has to be some grants that is reasonable for these people to apply for. So we've developed a portfolio of small exploratory research grants. You don't need preliminary data for them, but it helps you develop the data that you can then bootstrap yourself into a major grant. So I'm going to stop there and just suggest that you check out our website. You just have to Google Fogarty International Center and it'll come up. All our funding opportunities are announced there, and there's contact people at Fogarty for you to talk to if you want to discuss applying for any of these opportunities. Okay, thanks.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, we would like to thank you to our presenters for all these nice presentations and updates you gave about the thoughts from NIH, from PEPFAR, from HRSA. And we now are open for discussions. We'll take only, because of the time, we'll take only 3 questions, 1 for each of our presenters. We have one there.
Good morning. My name is Aster from Addis Ababa University, Department of Medical Laboratory Sciences. Thank you all the presenters, and thank you all of you, the partners, and the US taxpayers for supporting us. My question goes, Vamsi, you have displayed us the number of health professionals trained by country, and I saw medical lab professionals. Does it referring to the support that we were getting through CDC to standardize our curricula? Because I was coordinating the 8 medical laboratory schools that we were having in the country. Now we have like triple. There's one for Suzzane and others, and also Vamsi. Medical lab professionals, if you come to Ethiopia now, more than 40% of the health facilities in Ethiopia have no medical lab professionals. Achieving the 90s, achieving NCDs with HIV diagnostics. So I think the attention given to diagnostics is not parallel with this critical role that the medical laboratories are playing, in the healthcare system. So what is the opinion of all of you regarding attention being given to medical laboratory professionals, considering their significance in the healthcare system? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. As I explained before, the way PEPFAR works is the Department of State gives money to CDC, USAID, to HRSA, to NIH to implement the vision of PEPFAR. And so if you're receiving support from CDC for medical education, nursing education, lab professionals, whatever the cadre might be, it is PEPFAR money. So that's how it goes. So if you're receiving support from CDC, that is through PEPFAR. The second question about medical lab professionals, if I remember correctly, PEPFAR funded a medical lab technician course 2 years ago in Ethiopia. I was there when they were starting the discussions about developing the curriculum for that program. The need was, the country team recognized a great need for the medical lab professionals, and because of the shortage that you just mentioned. And we started developing curriculum at the time along with, it was either GE or one of the private companies that also partnered with us. We were going to develop the curriculum. GE was supposed to provide the medical equipment for training these graduates. So it was a public-private partnership model that we were using to develop this training course. I can follow up with the country team and ask them where they are in the process, but I know we initiated a specific training course for medical lab professionals 2 years ago.
Let me go ahead and just add something related to the lab professionals. One of the things that HRSA has funded, both in Ethiopia as well as Uganda and several other countries, is a program to train laboratorians in the diagnostics and the maintenance of the machines, because we know that that is one of the key areas that has been a problem and has been expensive, and to have folks come from these companies to run and maintain the machines or fix them, or they're broken and not used. So we've created these programs within these countries so that there are experts to be able to maintain the machines. Also, just taking off my HRSA hat for a moment, when I was at CDC, CDC worked very closely with PEPFAR and others to help create the it's the African Society for Lab Medicine, and that organization also is responsible for helping coordinate some of the work in training lab professionals across Africa and strengthen the profession. And then the last thing I wanted to say was something that I was talking with somebody in the audience about yesterday, and that's something we should be thinking about for AFREhealth. I'm not sure that we've included as many of the laboratorians in our, sort of in the council and in the constituency, and that's something we might want to think about in the future.
My name is Musa from UKZN. Again, to the USG, thank you for your support in Africa. My question for you, Suzzane, is can you just elaborate a little bit more in terms of what you mean by indigenous organizations, just for clarity? And Vamsi, I was just wondering if PEPFAR has done anything to ensure the integrity of the data it will be using in terms of prioritizing and making decisions. Thanks.
So for the question that you asked about indigenous organizations, I'm actually also going to defer to Vamsi, because that, I think, comes straight from OGAC.
Thanks, Okay, so the indigenous organizations is something that we are, it's fairly new, but it's not a new concept. Over the years, PEPFAR has always been advocating for local and indigenous, the way we define indigenous organizations is with a percentage of partnerships, percentage of investment that a local organization has in the company. We've always advocated for more host country ownership, and because that is the way to go for a sustainable response. We as international donors our strategy, our funding levels fluctuate all the time, but in order for us to have a sustainable response, it is critical to have strong indigenous organizations take over the work and implement the work. So it's not a new concept, but we are putting our words into action this time by as I said, it's all about data, and we set targets for the data. The target is 70-30. That's what we want to see from all our implementing agencies come out by the end of year 2020. We would like to see the funding, and we are tracking that right now. We have new methods to track our financial investments that we are rolling out this fiscal year, which will track how much of PEPFAR dollars are going to, what percentage is going to which organization, into which down to the level of to which site in a particular country, and how much are we investing in site, you name a site, any kind of facility in a country. That's the level of detail we want to get to make sure that the PEPFAR investments are going to local and indigenous organizations. Moses, I am not entirely sure about your second question. I may have missed it. Can you repeat that? Mm-hmm.
So we worry a lot about how much confidence we have in the data that is collected, especially if you're not overseeing the process of the data collection, and the people collecting the data may not necessarily have the sort of processes that we would ideally aspire to in terms of data collection, denominators and so forth. There's always a lot of data, especially in routine data collection.
Correct.
So I was just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of making sure that there is integrity in the data that is being used to make decisions, okay, especially because these decisions seem to have far-reaching consequences.
Of course. Thank you. We are well aware of the data quality issues that come across, because PEPFAR collects data on a quarterly basis, annual basis, and for some clinical indicators we do on a weekly basis. It is a very heavy data collection and use exercise that we run. And I see this as on two levels. One is the health worker level, where you need the health workers to be trained adequately in order to collect and report data. So, if you look at our pre-service training investments, there's a bunch of investments that we've made on improving. We have like M&E courses that we've funded in many of the universities in order to improve the capacity of the local health workers in facilities to collect and report data. The second level that we invest in, and we realize it's not just the worker, there has to be an enabling environment, an enabling system for the worker to report and the data to be processed. So we have significant investments in in HMIS, in DHIS, across many countries in order to make sure that data flows properly. And the third level is at the national level and also on PEPFAR headquarters level. If you are in the field in any of the PEPFAR countries in the next 2 months, you will see a flurry of activity going on about what we call DQA and EQA, data quality assurance and external quality assurance. We have teams going out in the next 2 months to randomly select sites, randomly select countries where we want to make sure that the data that we are getting from all these facilities that PEPFAR is supporting is of quality, and our experts from PEPFAR, from our implementing agencies, are going on these missions to randomly select sites to make sure that the data that we are reporting is of quality. We take data very seriously. We don't just make decisions based on random data. And the data that we put out on PEPFAR website and pepfar.gov is thoroughly checked for data quality. If we don't, it goes through an intense, rigorous system of data quality assurance within PEPFAR, and if it does not meet the criteria, we don't actually put out the data. It's not available for public consumption. So you'll see that on pepfar.gov, not all indicators are available for all years. It is because some years we did not get quality data, so we don't release that data. We don't believe in garbage data, as you said.
Thank you very much.